and welcome to the June edition of The Road To. We're going to focus on Northern Virginia politics today, and we've got an illustrious panel here with me. I'm going to start with introducing our new political analyst, Jennifer Boysko, and let Jennifer fill in the gaps here.
Thanks for having me, Patty. I really am looking forward to today's conversation. I spent the past five and a half years working for John Faust, our Dranesville District Supervisor, who is now our congressional candidate in the 10th District. I also spent the past year running for the House of Delegates in the Herndon area in the 86th District and lost narrowly by only 32 votes.
Yeah. It's an amazing race.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm sure you'll have a lot to add. We've got our old-timer here, John Flannery. Not that you're old, but John Flannery.
I am getting older. Old-timer, I'll accept it. I feel very special. We have Jennifer, who should be elected to compensate for that 32 votes, and she worked for John Faust, whom we also hope will be elected. I'm a recovering federal prosecutor. You never have a way to get over having that power as a young man. And I've worked on the Hill, on the House and the Senate side, but I represent the abused and misunderstood in law. And I tell people I do law and politics, but I get paid for the law. We have a firm in Loudoun County, and it's called Campbell Flannery, in case I forget where I work. So, because, old-timers, you see old-timers, short-term and long-term memory. But I'm glad to be here, and I think illustrious is a good way to describe the officials that we have with us today.
All right. Thanks, John. Marty Martinez from the Leesburg Town Council.
Well, I really appreciate being invited to be here, and again, being called illustrious is another adjective I can add to my campaign stuff. I've been on the Town Council for 12 years, running for re-election this November. Looking forward to the campaign and meeting all the residents. And I will say that town of Leesburg has been one of the best places to live in several like Forbes and CNN place to live, and I'm just great to be part of that town council that has made it that way.
Yeah.
And experienced.
Yes,
Thank
we call
Marty.
it experience.
And
You're
beloved
right,
in Loudoun County, I know that. And we also have, last but not least, Ken Plum, who has been in the House of Delegates for 34 years. And the district is 36?
36.
36th district, from Reston, primarily. Ken, why don't you give us some background? A lot of people know you, but
I never take it for granted. I'm happy to be with this distinguished panel today. And Patty, you're leading the show. This is my 34th year, which distinguishes me as being the longest-serving member of the House of Delegates currently.
Oh, wow.
It gives me a #1 license plate, and I say to people that and a couple dollars I can get a cup of coffee at Starbucks. What it does for you as a practical matter is it means you have to drive more carefully, because that #1 on your license plate, everybody knows exactly who you are.
Someone might rear end you.
But anyway, the 36th district is essentially Reston, a couple of precincts next door, close to between Reston and Herndon. But the great number of voters, great voters in that district that I'm pleased and honored to represent, and happy to be with you today.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken. We're going to start off with a little memorial, I guess, discussion for Mame Riley, who was a leader in the Democratic Party in Virginia for many, many years, was instrumental in getting Governor Mark Warner and Governor Tim Kaine elected. And I'm going to ask John to give a little bit of a overview of Mame so that we can honor her.
Right. Well, she died too young. I mean, we say that, but she was 61 years old. Mame was a political force of nature. If you squint and you try to imagine her, I can see her standing right here with a large smile on her face, ribbing Jim Moran, one of her favorite public officials, and they were like brother and sister, the two of them, and she had a real connection to that family. But she was part of the political family that is the Commonwealth of Virginia. She believed in issues. Yeats wrote, "It's an Irish curse to dream things the world has never seen." She dreamed things, she believed them, and she worked to make them happen. And after I left the Hill in 2001, after 9/11 and so forth, she sensed that I needed something to involve me, and she involved me, and she did that for everybody in the party. And when we had the primaries and general election in 2008, she always seemed to be like 1 or 2 degrees of separation from you everywhere in the campaign. And in terms of dreams coming through, here you have an election in which in the primary you have 2 people running for office that people said could never happen in America. An unbelievable woman and a fabulous black American who was a U.S. Senator. who then became president, and with any luck, the other primary candidate will. But the thing about that election was important is we talk about the involvement of everybody, we talk about everybody being involved, and Mame was in the middle of it happening. And at the convention, she was very active putting on all these various functions that talked about how we were all in this together and bringing people together. So I sort of feel that her spirit is in the mid-distance, inspiring us from the next world in this election, and will help all of us by her past example. And we all have a time on earth, and hers was very well spent, and the tears that we spend afterwards, I'd rather think of her humming a tune to an Irish jig, smiling back at us.
Well, she had a big impact on elections, and most people don't know her. They don't know that name, but she was extremely influential in getting 2 really good governors elected, at least, and Jim Moran, exactly. So
And she served on the Democratic National
Right.
Committee for years.
Oh, that's right.
So,
I
she
forgot
was-
about that. Yeah.
And you know, politics turns out to be too much about money, because in order to have a campaign, you got to raise some money, and she was a genius at doing that.
Amazing at that.
She's amazing
yeah.
at that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to. There are a lot of things going on this week from the White House level. We'll just do a quick White House review, and then we'll get to both the state and local politics. The president was all over the place this week. Brussels for the G7, Normandy for the D-Day, a more 70th year. What's the word I'm trying to find?
D-Day Memorial.
D-Day celebration.
anniversary.
Anniversary.
Yeah.
That was not a hard word. And one of the other things that went on was an introduction of a carbon dioxide limitations that affect existing power plants, which is the first time that's happened. Jennifer, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I just understand it marginally. I haven't been involved in it at all, but my understanding is that it's going to be a state-by-state approach, so there'll be significant flexibility for each state as we look at it. They've got about a year to go in and make their plans, and then based on how many coal plants there are in a state, it's going to depend on what their targeted reduction is going to be. I know that in the state of Washington, they only have 1 plant, and it's already been scheduled to be closing in this timeline, so they're going to reduce by 70%. Other states have a much smaller target, like 20%. So it's going to be staggered throughout the country. One thing that I think we all have to be cognizant of, though, is the health care, the health implications. For every dollar that this is going to cost nationwide, we're looking at $7 in savings for health costs in the future. I don't know if you all have kids who have asthma. I have asthma myself. I have a daughter who has significant breathing problems, and everybody on their sports team seem to have asthma these days. We're looking at a real opportunity here. It is gonna hurt some folks, but if we plan carefully and thoughtfully, I think this is going to be an enormous
You mean hurt
benefit.
some pocketbooks? Or
Well, it is.
what
I
do you
mean, the coal industry is going to have to make some changes,
Yeah.
but we're also going to have to take, the wind production. We have the opportunity. Virginia Power has the opportunity to do some offshore wind, and we're all just going to have to realize this. In a recent Washington Post article, the EPA estimates that the public health and climate benefits of this rule will outweigh the costs by anywhere from 8 to 1 to 12 to 1 by 2030. We can't ignore
You
that.
have to think strategically about this. John, did you want
Yeah, well, I'd like to supplement. I think everything she said is spot on. I went to a conference in West Virginia, sort of the heart of opposition
country.
to any of these provisions, and Morgantown. And this is what I found. Senator Manchin came in and basically said, "We're for a good environment, except unless it costs something." And this is the way they see it. We, by compromising our health and the health care that we pay for and what our children suffer and what older people suffer and everybody suffers as a result of them spewing toxic materials into the air that we breathe, we subsidize their profits because we bear those costs. In addition, we also compromise our health up to and including death.
Yeah.
There isn't any question about this.
And so do the people working in the coal.
Well, exactly, and there are fewer of them. One of their earlier arguments, we give jobs. Well, they give fewer and fewer as they've automated the process, and they just top off mountains, destroying the environment and valleys and any future for those localities. So what they're going to do, and what they are trying to do, is when they write these regulations, particularly in West Virginia and Kentucky and places like that, they're going to try to write them in such a way as to do less than is required. The guidelines come from the EPA. States are supposed to conform to those guidelines. If they fail, then the test will be whether EPA actually goes out and enforces
something about
anything.
it, yeah.
But what happens is when you read the law, it says there will be no pollution of the air, there'll be no pollution of the water. Those aren't the specific languages. Except and unless. And then that's what they do. All the litigation is all those exceptions, all those unlesses. And one of them is the profit loss question, which is what we were referring to. And that profit loss statement, they say, well, it costs too much to do this. Well, you can't have clean coal, and they're not even trying. And they're not going to probably start new plants. So they're going to try to delay as long as they can, get as much profit as they can. And hopefully in the meantime, we will spend public dollars and private dollars to develop these alternative sources that have been out there. But if you will, the legacy industries are pulling us back and compromising our ability to be independent in energy because they want us to use everything under the ground, fossil fuels, fracking, gas and oil, instead of exploring these other powerful mechanisms, which if we have a way to conserve the energy in batteries and we have a way to be more efficient, we have a path out of this.
Depends on what we put our heads into, right? And Marty or Ken, do you have?
Well, I could play a little devil's advocate and quote House Speaker Boehner. What's wrong with carbon emissions? We all expel carbon dioxide. I mean, what's wrong with it? Well, the problem is it kills you.
You could do that. Oh, there's a reason.
It's the oxygen coming back the other way we're worried about.
Yeah, so,
we don't breathe carbon dioxide.
It's that attitude. That attitude, like, what's the problem?
Killer trees.
Right, and unfortunately, taking accountability and taking responsibility for these issues cost money. And you know what? They have made a lot of money off of this already, and they're just seeing all their profits. Well, no, we got people we're concerned about, the health and welfare of these people. And, you have to be accountable for it and take the responsibility to do the right thing.
And societal costs. Ken, do you?
Well, I want to commend the president for taking this on. I mean, we've been pushing this issue off for years and years, the willingness to take it on. And secondly, to recognize the reality that the states are different. We're in different positions in terms of what we need to do. Virginia's kind of in the middle of the pack of what needs to be done to clean up our air. To the credit, Dominion over the years has done some pretty good work on some of their coal plants, working to close out some of the others, so we'll get there. The thing to recognize is that a recent poll just last week in Virginia found 70% of Virginians supporting these clean air standards.
Yeah.
The thing being is, how do you get there? The notion that somehow it adversely affects the economy, I would suggest to you can build an argument just as strong to say it helps the economy, because what it does is it creates new industries, new ways to create energy and so on. It gets us a more healthy environment. At the same time, it can get us a more healthy economy if we work at it right.
And new technologies that are exportable too,
Particularly,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, so speaking of Virginia, let's go back to you, Ken. The budget situation, the fight over the budget, we touched on this last month and the month before, I think, on the fight over Medicaid expansion. Can you kind of give us the facts on that?
Sure. We actually had a pretty good session this year. Our regular session, we dealt with ethics reform. We made some headway there. SOL reform. A lot of people have been concerned about that in the schools, and we made some headway there. Mental health, we made some progress. But the big issue in the even number of years is passing a budget. And where we got hung up there was the fact that to do Medicaid expansion, that has an impact on the budget. And it's been the insistence on myself and a lot of us to say that you really have to deal with the budget and the Medicaid together. It's 20% of the budget. It's a huge source of revenue. Those who've been opposed to the idea of expanding Medicaid, and they're truthfully people who don't see that the goal should be to extend health care to 400,000 Virginians, the working poor, wanted to somehow cut the two apart, pass a budget, typical budget that we passed in the past time, and then leave Medicaid to be dealt with separately. The Senate was insistent on us not doing it that way. House Democrats were insistent on keeping the two together, and we continue to be at an impasse.
Can I ask you a question, though? The Medicaid expansion, is that just part of the Commonwealth of Virginia's approach to affordable health care? I mean, that's combined with some of the exchanges, right? But there are people that still fall through the cracks, that still don't have insurance, still really can't afford some of the premiums. Is that correct? Is that the expansion part of it?
If you look at the broad range of health insurance coverages, we got those people who can afford health insurance and they're taken care of and so on. We've had Medicaid for the very poorest, the older, the disabled and so on, and regular Medicaid has taken care of that. Expansion moves it up to the working poor, we say, those people in between. There are about 1 million uninsured Virginians who don't qualify in the exchange to get a tax credit or to get a tax subsidy, but rather to be able to be served by Medicaid. That approaches 400,000 Virginians who could fall into that category. So the expansion idea is to give people an alternative other than the emergency room, which is the most expensive health alternative that you have. It causes healthcare costs to go up. It also means that people don't get any preventative care, so they get sicker before they seek coverage. So there are lots of good reasons why everybody should have access to health care.
Before they're in a massive crisis, if possible.
There's one pregnant omission, though, one of the really salient points about why we should do this is where the money comes from. Where's it? In other words, are Virginia taxpayers paying for this?
I was about to say.
Okay.
For me,
sorry,
I interrupted.
For me, it's a moral issue. But if you look at the economics of it, the Affordable Care Act in part passed because it had a built-in funding mechanism. It did not add to the national debt. So the argument in passing the Affordable Care Act couldn't be that somehow it would contribute to the national debt because it added 21 new taxes paid by Virginians and everyone else in this country. And of course, when the Affordable Care Act was tested before the court, it was found to be constitutional, but states were allowed then the option on the Medicaid part to opt in by court decision. What that means now, if you haven't opted in, is that your citizens are paying those taxes, but they're not getting the money back. In fact, the amount of dollars we're talking about is $5 million a day. We're talking about $750 million that Virginians have walked away from by not passing a budget that includes a Medicaid expansion. So it's not just a moral issue, it's an economic issue. And then it's a health issue in terms of keeping people healthy.
For example, we took that number. It's $28,000 for the town of Leesburg a day that we're giving away. And we signed a letter resolution to recommend that we pass this Medicaid expansion, and we got criticized for it. But when you look at $28,000 a day of Leesburg taxpayers' money going to somebody else. Now, again, there's the two issues. There's the moral issue, which for me, those 400,000 people, when I was growing up, I was on that low end spectrum. It was my mom and 10 of us, and we needed help. Not everybody can be, have the luxury of having health care provided for them. So we need to take care of them. And in this country, there's no way we should ever have anybody having to want for health care. The other comment that you made that these people are still going to seek health care. They're going to seek it in a more expensive way, which drives up our HMO cost, our health care cost. So economically, if you're providing this health care and you're giving them the health care, we are essentially going to lower our health care costs. I don't see why fiscally people can't get that.
Well, I think there's a division in the following way between lip service and performance. The lip service is, we care about people and no one should suffer. And then you have an opportunity to do something and you don't do it. The second part of the lip service is, we pay taxes, we should get our benefits back, and here we have an opportunity to do it, and we're not. That's the entire political debate. So whether it's the moral or the fiscal question,
Yeah.
The merits are on the side of doing it.
And
Jennifer,
even
go
our
ahead.
businesses are behind this. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce are behind it. Local chambers of commerce have gotten behind it. In fact, they're going to be doing an event on Wednesday, the 11th in Lorton, to show their support for it. Small businesses and members from the chambers around the Northern Virginia area. This is something I can't believe that we're leaving on the table. $5 million a day.
Let's talk about what's the big elephant in the room. When we talk about all these, it all seems to make sense. But what's keeping our legislature? It's political.
It's political.
They do not want Democrats. They don't want the president to be successful in anything. So they're doing everything to say no. You know, making common sense decisions is no longer part of the agenda. It's how successful are we going to do to block this?
Yeah, Ken, you're living it. Do we have opportunities, or is there just too much ideological rigidity on the other side?
Well, people have to get involved, and they have to say to local legislators, and legislators need to hear from people not only in their district but throughout the Commonwealth, because it's a Commonwealth issue. There are people in Leesburg who need the service. There are people in Reston who need the service.
Exactly.
In Loudoun and Fairfax for sure. So we're talking not only about our own local people, we're talking about people statewide. So we need to raise a loud voice to say that we cannot allow this to happen. Because what you need to know that on the other side, Americans for Prosperity have 14 lobbyists registered in Virginia. The regular spokesperson now against the expansion of Medicaid in Virginia is a person who works for the Americans for Prosperity. That's the Koch brothers and the monies that they're bringing. And what's the politics of this then for the people who oppose it? The politics is that if you vote for this, since you voted for the transportation package last year, they'll say to Republicans, you vote for this, and in the primary you face opposition. So it's the fear on the part of a number of legislators, both Senate and House, who are going to be up for election next year, the prospect of having a right-wing challenge. Now, we could say, gee, you still need to do what's right, and that's my view, you ought to do what's right.
Yeah.
But for some who are concerned about their political life, it's the threat of like a primary challenge.
Can I just say something? I wish we could get back to a time when serving in office was about the issues and not about your personal agenda and staying in office.
Yeah.
If they would just do the right thing, they need to realize every member is replaceable. And if everyone would just stand up and vote the right way for their constituents and realize this doesn't have to be a lifelong service, that somebody else could come in and serve right behind them and do the right thing, then we would be able to get rid of people like Americans for Prosperity who would not have
But
that
those are
anymore.
nationwide networks too, with a different sort of hardcore ideological agenda
And lots
that
of
doesn't
money.
make
And lots of
sense.
money.
It
Well,
doesn't
but
make sense.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's worse than the individual issues. That it's sort of like what is really going on here, and what it is we have an array of issues, which are all instruments to disassemble government among ideologues. So, if you have quote Obamacare, which they meant as a slander,
Affordable Care Act.
we want the Affordable Care Act, which has been proven to be now. In fact, my premiums have gone down, and I have expanded coverage because the risk is being shared. There's already a larger pool. But that's only part of it. If you name anything that will affect the community as a whole that shows empathy and fairness, there's resistance if the government is part of that solution. So if you want a theme, you look at a candidate who says, I'm against this thing, you say, why could that be? And the answer is the hidden ideology that they believe, not only should there be less government, almost there should be no government. It's a nonviolent, anarchical view of government. They can't articulate it that way, they don't.
Hey guys, we
but
got
they
just a
believe
couple
that
minutes
way.
before break, and related to this, I wanted to go back to Ken's mention of mental health, which is extremely important. We just saw another Virginia Tech type shooting go on in Santa Barbara. The parents were engaged. I mean, there's the gun issues, there's the violence in video games, all that. But at the root of it, there's a mental health gap in how we address these very serious problems. And I just wondered, like at the state level, you said there'd been some success there.
There's been some success in terms of changing the procedures by which we detain someone who has a mental health episode. But beyond that, though, what we need are crisis intervention centers. You know, sometimes it is the case that we'll find someone who needs hospitalization, but no facilities or programs are available.
Right.
So one of the things to tie back to the Affordable Care Act that this allows us to do is to bring a sizable amount of money into Virginia that can respond to issues like mental health. When we do that also, too, we free up some state money that we've been paying for indigent care. And when we free that money up, we can do things like education or mental health or whatever we do. Back to the point that expanding Medicaid makes good sense in terms of mental health care needs of Virginians, for the health care needs of poor people and the working poor in Virginia, those people who work in the fast food markets and so on, those kind of people getting health care. It makes a whole lot of good sense. We've got to get
those people are under a lot of stress sometimes, just trying to make it.
Not all the legislators who are opposed to this are tied into the ideological framework John has mentioned, but they're afraid to take on that framework. So
That's
a
right.
dozen people can control the place just by that threat.
Sad.
And as you know, in Loudoun County, one Republican incumbent
One bad
lost in
apple
a
can
primary.
spoil the whole bunch, girl. Okay. We have to take a break, and we'll be right back for the second half of The Road 2 in a few minutes.
Events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember,
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation,
Under God.
Indivisible.
with liberty.
And justice.
For all.
in America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield. But nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I am sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of.
I work 6 days a week.
Who
do you think you
Stand up
are?
straight.
Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
What kind of man are you? I'm a father. Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schlasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy. Hi, Dad.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. Precious places. Timeless places. Places that, with your help, can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
Are there problems in the Fairfax?
Huge.
Welcome back. We're at the second half of the road too. Sorry, we're chatting here.
So good. That's right.
Anyway, we're going to kick off by this part by kind of transitioning from this discussion of what government's for, and we'll let Marty Martinez, our Leesburg Town Council representative here, speak to that, and then just tell us how the government's working for you there.
Well, one of the things that I had mentioned earlier was that the problem with the town of Leesburg is that we really have no problems. We're doing great, all right?
Well, we got to continue the people who are running that town now.
Exactly.
Hey, there's an election in November.
There you go. But seriously, one of the themes that I've always felt that, why is there a government? And I mentioned earlier was that government is there to do collectively what we cannot do individually: build roads, build bridges, take care of things on a more community basis than individual. And so that's where the town of Leesburg is really community-based kind of government. Over the last 6, 7, 8 years, we have not raised the property tax or the tax bill for our residents. Matter of fact, we've lowered it in some cases. And we've done that with 25% less government. And how did we do that? Well, of course, economics, market caused some of the drop in revenues, but we really have not had an issue like that. We're actually doing more with less, improving processes. Our planning department, we've really worked hard to take that from a 3 or 4 or 5 application review down to 2. We do a lot of pre-business development stuff going on. We have Crescent Place right there off of Middleburg, off of Catoctin. We got a beautiful new development coming on. We got other things coming in. Town of Leesburg's looking pretty good. And when we talk about our budgets, we have a 2-year running budget that it used to take 4 or 5 different Saturdays to go through the budget, and now we've got it down to a point where it's hardly we still have those special meetings, but they're not as involved or detailed. We have a great town manager, and as a matter of fact,
who's the town manager?
John Wells. And he's retiring in October. And we have, there is a little controversy there. We have some people who feel that finding the best talent from within is not the right way to go. Let's go and spend $150,000, $200,000 to do a nationwide research when we have the talent here locally. What we did, John Wells took Kai Dentler, who is going to be our new town manager in October. Kai has run Parks and Rec, he's run Airport, he's run capital projects.
Oh, wow.
And he's
sees the whole picture.
Buried.
He knows, and he's been a town resident since I've been in the town. And here is a guy that is involved in the community, has all this experience, has been John's deputy town manager for 7, 8 years, and yet we don't want to hire the best talent from within.
Well, an experience
but
and
you
institutional
are, though, right?
knowledge.
Well, we
You
are.
decided, but there was consideration not to.
Well, we're being criticized that we're not using our diversity to go out and hire somebody from outside. Well, honestly, the town of Leesburg is a great place for somebody to come in, work 3 or 4 years, and then guess what? That's another rung on the ladder. They can go now to a bigger town. Yeah. Well, I don't want to be a stepping stone for somebody's career. I want somebody there who buys in the community. Okay. And so we hired Kai Dentler. Now, here's the funny part is that when you talk about diversity, and I hired a Kai Dentler, 3 women, 2 white guys, and a Mexican voted for Kai. How is that not diverse? You know what I mean? And Kai has definitely got the best. He's the best candidate out there with the best talent. So again, I go back. What's wrong with the town of Leesburg? We're doing some great stuff. Nothing. We're doing wonderful. And we want to talk about my re-election. I want to keep doing that. I want to keep doing more with less. I want to keep the quality of life better or increase it, not degrade it, which is some of our opposition wants to do.
Let me go to Jennifer, because you've worked for how many years for John Faust as his supervisor in the Fairfax County Board, right?
Sure. I joined him when he took office in 2008, and one of the things that I find so impressive about what he does is he makes sure that he's pulling in members of the community to sit on task force to help make decisions and inform him. He has a year-round budget task force group that goes through the budget line by line and finds savings and programs that aren't working, and then he is able to really be very educated as he's addressing it in the markup.
Oh,
also, we've worked tirelessly on the Silver Line Metro expansion,
yeah.
and have worked interjurisdictionally. So people from the town of Herndon, people from Fairfax County, people from Loudoun County, MWA, and VDOT have all...
Gotta spell that out for the audience.
MWA, the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority.
Okay, thank you.
Have worked together to address the interjurisdictional challenges, because as we're driving down the road, we don't notice, all of a sudden I'm in Loudoun County or I'm in the town of Herndon. We need to be able to make it seamless.
so-and-so's district.
Right, so we've addressed those issues together to make sure that we're aware of one another's problems and challenges, as well as where our strengths are, so that we can make it as cohesive and work together as well as possible. That's the kind of leader that John has been, and I know that as I just find it a great honor to work for the Fairfax County government, because it is a functioning, very effective government. And it's not about politics, it's about serving the community, and we do that every single day.
And the good news is that John Faust has offered himself to run for the U.S. Congress.
That's right.
And bringing those kind of talents that we certainly need from the congressional office, the involvement of the community and understanding of the budget, and then willingness to make hard decisions and go forward. So we look forward to his candidacy for 10th District.
Building on that argument, when among my service in Congress was Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren from Silicon Valley. And we talked about her community service. She was on the Board of Supervisors, and she says in those positions there is no partisan politics, in the sense that if there's a flood in the street, there's not a Democrat or Republican solution. You have to deal with that problem. And that's the background that John has running for Congress, in a Congress that has shown itself to be dysfunctional and to be so divisive in a partisan way, that I think we need more people that understand delivering services and have a way of developing a dialogue to get things done. When I served in Congress as staff, what I found was years ago, in '96 even, and all the way up till 1999 probably, you could get bipartisan bills. Certainly there are a whole bunch of issues that you could do that on. But now there's a perpetual campaign. Everything's a wedge issue. When you talk to senators or members of Congress, they talk about how even the leadership has that problem. And I think John brings to it both a maturity, but also a kind of service experience that allows him to contribute to a dialogue that's become toxic, and perhaps to alleviate the dissension that we have over stuff that really doesn't matter to the elected, to the people they're supposed to represent. So when we're talking about the kinds of government, we're talking about local government, but we're talking about a very serious congressional race here. And we have a candidate from the Republican Party, Barbara Comstock, who represents everything of the ideology we were talking about, which is that government is the problem, not the solution, and they like to invoke Reagan. But even when the government is going to help federal employees, it's going to help the sick, it's going to help people get an education, it's going to help us get transportation through Northern Virginia, she is on record as against all of those things, pretends to be for women, and has passed legislation in the General Assembly that compromises them. By contrast, John Faust is a fellow who's had a hands-on experience in government without regard to partisan ideology, and knows how to make it work and has made it work. And that's what we deserve in Northern Virginia. That's what we deserve in the Congress nationwide. And she's also, we were talking about the Koch brothers before, she's supported by them. Now, people invoke those brothers like everybody knows what they stand for. But what they stand for is everything she stood for that I've just criticized. And so they're entitled to spend their money. But when they spend their money and you know what they're for, you should take it as a mark of slander against any candidate that would accept that and say, I'm not going with that candidate. I don't care what party they're in if there's that kind of support from a money lender.
Just to be clear for people who aren't, political junkies like we are, you're talking about the Koch brothers. We talked earlier about sort of the ideological litmus tests that go on in the state government. We've seen some local governments that don't seem to function that way because they got to take care of business and the issues that they're dealing with. So just so that people, in the audience are clear, what are the top 3 things that you think that the Koch brothers expect from the candidates that they give money to?
Well, what they expect is that, to choose a couple of big issues, in my opinion, they won't raise taxes for any purpose, no matter how much they're needed to balance a budget or make things happen. They're against health in America, particularly the Affordable Care Act, that they prefer to call Obamacare, that Obama has embraced as a name, proud as he is.
Government enabling of
government enabling
expanded
insurance
health
to cover health care for people in America who have none and who therefore their lives are at risk and endangered, and the only time they get any health care is when they go to an emergency room, because that's the only place where they can get service when it's too late, so there's no preventive care, and then we pick up the tab anyhow. It's a heartless approach
well, I
to
mean,
health
that's
care.
why Romney Care was.
And to round it out,
That's why that made sense, and then
and to
didn't.
round it out, the environment will take care of itself, even though we are affecting it, and it's been proven by every scientific analysis that you can imagine. So there's a whole series of these issues, and these issues, again, I think all fit the theme. We want no government. We want to just run and do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
And the deal that was made in America between an upper class that did provide, in terms of income anyhow, that provided certain opportunities, a middle class that professionally bore a burden but was compensated for it, and then a quote lower class or poor class in which there were transfer payments, so we left no person behind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that contract has been broken in America, and the Koch brothers, or however they say their name, because I think of Koch, they don't believe in that contract.
It looks like Koch, but I always hear it pronounced Coke.
You're right. Their view is greed. Greed is good. You know, it's the Gecko movie made live. Greed is good. Take what you can. And even though Darwin never said it, and these people don't believe in what he said, they believe in the survival of the fittest, which means the wealthiest who can crush and take advantage of any person who can't afford to compete with them. And they do everything they can to compromise bargaining power of workers between and among themselves to form unions to actually bargain collectively for working conditions and fair pay. So it's a whole series of things.
What I'm hearing brings up, I think, a really important sort of future evolution in politics, and to me it's represented by the issues that Elizabeth Warren highlights. Mm-hmm. So issues that relate to middle class. In a lot of countries in the world, middle class is expanding. In our country,
it's shrinking.
It's the anxious class.
One of the biggest reasons, I think, for less money being in the economy and less prosperity is related to higher education, which I've seen initiatives on that. But Ken, what is going on in the state legislature related to making higher education more affordable?
Well, first of all, on the broader topic, what we have to do is to make sure that these outside influences, and I could not be as dramatic as John in terms of describing what they want to do.
He's got rhetorical flourish.
Yeah, they certainly want to contract government. And contracting government in all forms means things like you take public education to charter school levels, mm-hmm. And then in terms of higher education, it's survival of the fittest in terms of who can pay the fees. Yeah. And so you've seen over the last several years, last decade or so, in Virginia, a gradual shift of fewer state dollars in the mix and more tuition dollars. And parents and grandparents who are watching the show understand exactly what I'm talking about. The bills getting higher.
Hello.
That's what I'm living with.
And we started off with an understanding that when people get a better education, they're able to get a job, they're able to contribute to the economy. That we've been all benefit from that. Mm-hmm. And so that education has always been to be viewed as a social cost. There seems to be a movement after we talk about less government to move away from that. Mm-hmm. What I think we have to be conscious of is to recognize that all these radio ads that are going on now throughout Virginia that slam Obamacare, and that's what they call it, Obamacare. It's not meant to be a friendly word. It's meant to try to attach to the fact that the president is very unpopular in terms of Virginia, attach that to the health care. We've got to be aware of the fact that there are outsiders who are saying that.
Is he very unpopular in Virginia, having won Virginia a year and a half ago? Or is it just the fear? It's the fear-mongering over something about this health care plan is bad.
Unpopular. I would say he's very popular. I would say that right now you got a select few making a lot of noise, and that say they're speaking for the majority when they're not.
When
They're
they're not,
speaking for a small minority. And there are many people that I've talked to that have looked at this Affordable Care Act. I refuse to call it because
you almost couldn't say it.
It's the Affordable Care Act that
legally,
was
right?
passed by Congress and was deemed constitutional by the Supreme Court. Stop whining.
And 40 times they tried to pass it in Congress and they could not.
Right. So again, more. My feeling goes with all of this is that I mentioned it at a meeting the other day, was that in this country, there should never be anybody for want of shelter, health care, education, and food. Everybody in this country, we should not have to worry about, homeless people, mental health issues. We're a great country. Why are we dickering about this stuff?
Yeah.
Can I just I wanted to turn to Jennifer because she just was last year was your race, right? And so you have to dive into all these issues and really be smart on how they play out at the state level. You lost by 32 votes.
Right.
You're going to run again, right?
Yes.
So let me let you have the floor for a little while to talk about how you think that's really impacts real people's lives and what sort of some of the angst about it. We have a Democratic panel here today. We usually have a balanced panel, but in reality, what's the angst versus, how it benefits people and then the societal costs of not doing this?
Are we talking about the healthcare expansion still? Well, I'll tell you, I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine who is in commercial real estate. He has paid $5,000 a month in his healthcare premium for himself, his wife, his brother who has a lot of health problems. Once the Affordable Care Act went into action, he was told that it didn't cover enough, so he had to get a different policy. Lo and behold, his new policy is $1,500 less a month. It has no co-pays, so he's not out of pocket at all, and it covers a broader amount of services than the one he was paying $5,000 a month for. So this wasn't somebody who even expected to benefit from it. He's a successful businessman, but we have the opportunity to make a real difference in 400,000 Virginians' lives. We're losing $5 million a day. I know in my district, the 86th district, the Commonwealth Institute estimated that about 36,000 residents would have the capacity to be helped in this.
Oh, wow.
We have healthcare clinics that are struggling, and if we don't take on the Marketplace Virginia, is that what we call the Senate's version? Then they're at risk of failing because the money doesn't make sense. The dollars and cents at the end of the day don't make sense because not enough people have insurance. We know that the hospitals support this. We know that it's fiscally makes common sense to everyone. We know that regular people who are already covered in insurance stand the chance of benefiting from this. Plus, let's talk about all of the people who don't have good packages already, who have been struggling without health care and now can buy into a system where they can have some peace of mind and sleep at night.
So John Faust at the national level would be supportive.
He is supportive of it.
Can anyone speak to Barbara Comstock's position on that?
Oh, sure. She, a year or so ago, said that she would look for a practical solution for Medicaid. I will stand corrected by Ken. And then she now is strongly opposed to it, particularly during the primary. And it's one of those positions that the Koch brothers also espouse, that is, that you shouldn't do it.
Three challengers in the Republican primary?
Yes, and she just outdistanced them in the right. Short of, I don't know, primitive man, I don't think you could have gone any further. But you see, I think that what we're seeing is, I understand the ads. I think the ads are to drive the base. I think what
the radio ads that Ken was talking about?
Yes, I don't mean that they're exclusively that, because obviously they're seen. But the ads are to drive the base, because what we learned in what the Republicans believe they learned in the last election is they could have won the election with the base if they had been smarter than Obama had been about how he identified his supporters. And so they figured in an off-year election with low turnout, the base could be even more important. So the radio ads are to say Obamacare. Now this is the second vicious part, and you're all welcome to dissent from my view. But I think this is the Lee Atwater School raised up to the current generation, which is there are certain plain words they could say years ago in the South, and now we have other words. And Obamacare is one of those words because it's Obama. I believe the Tea Party wouldn't have existed if Obama hadn't been elected. And I believe in Virginia, when we're talking about Medicaid, they're not thinking middle class. They're saying, oh, it's about persons of color. And that is the terrible and the vicious and the shameful thing about modern Republican campaigning in the red states. And that's what Obamacare is about, and that's why you're right not to say it. And that's what we're fighting. And as a fella who does law and politics, you can't win the argument you don't make. And we should call him on it. There should be ads on it. We should have Lee Atwater's quotes. He gave an interview in which he said this years ago before he got cancer from a tumor. We should play that ad and say they haven't changed their game plan since. It goes back to Nixon. The Southern strategy was this. Because the Democratic Party had the nerve to say you should be equal in America, they used it against us to say, and they pulled the race card. Yeah. And the only thing that's changed in the Republican hierarchy is the language. Yeah. We use symbols more, but we all know what they're talking about, and that's what Medicaid is about, that's what Obamacare is about, and that's what we're fighting. And this is a sacred trust we have to fulfill the promise that they have compromised at almost every turn in the last and this century.
And on the model of John, I'd like to give the rest of you sort of an opportunity. We have about 5 minutes left to speak to the larger national picture, because this is a congressional midterm election. Turnout's huge. I thought John's point about you can't win an argument that you don't make. You can't stand back and let the loudest voices win. Marty, let's go to you, and just what's your perspective on what's at stake this year and how this might play out?
Well, first off, I never got the opportunity to endorse John on the show. I endorsed him personally already. One of the reasons I think that he would be good for a Faust. Thank you.
F-O-U-S-T.
Yes. Well, since
current supervisor in Fairfax County.
Correct. Has experience. No, seriously, I talk with him. I've had a lot of meetings with him, gone to different events, and he's actually come to my house. We sat down and we talked about what he believes in. And one of the things that I found is that I think this is a guy that I could actually, when he wins Congress, still invite him over for dinner.
And you could.
Yeah. He's approachable, he's common sense, he's very sincere, and that, when you talk about a national level, that's what we need to bring back to Congress.
Yes.
We need people to go to Congress, and their first thing should not be, how do I get reelected? Because right now the strategy, and this is the same thing for the Virginia legislature and Senate, is that
town councilman, may I say.
Well, now, I will tell you this: I do not look to get reelected. As far as when I get elected and I'm on town council, my first job is not to get reelected. It's to enact legislation that services the people of the community I represent. And that's what we need to do on a national level and on a state level, is that when you get elected, forget your party. Have some integrity. Do what's right for the people you're serving. And that includes the people who are disadvantaged, that 400K, not the developers, not the rich people who have special agenda items who are willing to pay for weddings. Did I let that come?
A reference to somebody. Well, let's let Ken kind of give his big picture on 2014.
Well, ultimately what it comes down to, and if you take a look at the Obama race in Virginia was mostly red in terms of geography. Obama didn't carry many jurisdictions. He carried jurisdictions obviously with population and jurisdictions in which we had moved the base. Virginia can win more races at the state level and at the local level and at the congressional level if we can in fact activate the base. So how do you do that? Well, you have to make the argument about what's important. We cannot let people from outside Virginia come in with their multiple millions of dollars, and we're talking about millions of dollars of expenditures now, to try to create a message that is alien to what we would want to have happen. And it means that a whole lot of citizens have to get concerned. They have to get motivated. They have to get moved. We as political animals try to do that all the time. But I hope along the way, as faith communities, as organizations, business organizations and so on, become more aware of what's happening with the politics in Virginia, they'll be so offended that they'll go out and make sure on this year when we're electing a senator, a U.S. senator, when we're electing members of Congress,
Yeah, we
that
haven't
they'll
even
get
mentioned the
themselves
Warner
involved.
race.
Well, and, we've got a senator who needs to be returned to office. And then next year, we'll look towards the state elections for a greater level of participation. Gerrymandering of legislatures now work for the people's disadvantage. That if we who believe in the things that you've heard talked about on this show don't get ourselves in gear, get ourselves out to vote, and take a couple people with us, this kind of government will continue. So it really is a matter for people to get activated.
Outside, the money coming from outside is really, it distorts the message.
It does.
Jennifer, let's finish up with you and how you think 2014, you're obviously very intimately involved in a congressional race, so.
Yes, I've known John Faust since 2003. He's someone that I think is above and beyond his integrity, his intelligence, his ability to sit at the table and help solve problems. It's exactly what we need. I worked on the Hill back in the late 80s, and that was a time when people worked together. John's the kind of guy.
I was there too.
He can
a lot of veterans here.
he can sit down at the table, and I liked what Marty just said is, you know, when someone's running, they shouldn't be running for re-election all the time. They should be running to solve problems. That's the kind of leader that John is. And of course, we haven't talked about Senator Mark Warner, who we absolutely have to help him keep his seat. Yeah. He's one of the pragmatic problem solvers who is, you know, crucial in the U.S. Senate. Yeah. We've all got to do our work, though, because if we're not participating, if we're not acting, we're leaving it to someone else.
Great note to end on. We have to wrap it up. And thank you for joining us on this June edition of The Road To, and we'll see you next month.